From a chassis found in a London junkyard to a magician's costly mistake, the iconic Batmobile from Tim Burton's Batman hides secrets that even die-hard fans don't know. This jet black beast was cobbled together from Ferraris, London buses, and fighter jets, yet could barely exceed 30 mph. Batman's ears were too tall to fit inside. A comedian spent $500,000 upgrading his own, and General Motors almost ruined the whole design. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Batmobile used in Tim Burton's Batman. Fact 1. Built from a London junkyard. Find the foundation of one of cinema's most iconic vehicles started its life in a place most people would never expect, a grimy London scrapyard filled with rusted-out cars and forgotten machinery. When production designer Anton Furst and his team began the monumental task of creating the Batmobile for Tim Burton's 1989 Batman film, they needed something sturdy and long enough to match their ambitious vision. What they found was a 1967 Chevrolet Impala sitting among the wreckage, and despite its sorry state, they saw potential in its robust chassis. The Impala's frame was solid enough to support the massive custom bodywork they planned to build, but there was one significant problem. It wasn't nearly long enough. The designers envisioned a vehicle that would stretch an intimidating 20 feet from bumper to bumper, far longer than any standard car on the road. To solve this issue, the team tracked down a second 1967 Impala chassis and performed what can only be described as automotive surgery. They carefully cut sections from both frames and welded them together, creating a single extended chassis that could accommodate their radical design. This Frankenstein approach to car building might sound crude, but it was exactly the kind of inventive problem-solving that defined the entire Batmobile project. The spliced-together Impala chassis became the hidden skeleton of the Batmobile, supporting thousands of pounds of custom fiberglass bodywork, fake weaponry, and the jet turbine engine mounted in the rear. It's remarkable to think that this symbol of cutting-edge superhero technology was quite literally built on the bones of two old American sedans pulled from a junkyard across the Atlantic Ocean from Hollywood. Fact 2. Batman's ears were too big. Michael Keaton faced an unexpected obstacle when he first attempted to slip into the driver's seat of the newly completed Batmobile. His costume simply wouldn't fit inside the vehicle. The problem wasn't Keaton's height or the size of his padded muscle suit, but rather the tall, pointed ears that jutted dramatically from the top of his Batman cowl. Costume designer Bob Ringwood had created the iconic bat ears to be long and imposing, giving Batman a menacing silhouette that looked fantastic when the Dark Knight was standing on rooftops or stalking through shadows. However, nobody had considered how those towering ears would interact with the Batmobile's low-slung cockpit until Keaton actually tried to climb inside. The interior of the Batmobile was deliberately designed to be cramped and cockpit-like, with a low roof that added to the vehicle's sleek aerodynamic appearance. When Keaton ducked his head to enter, the pointed tips of his cowl's ears immediately scraped and caught against the roof, making it physically impossible for him to sit down in a normal driving position. The production team quickly realized they had a serious problem on their hands, as they couldn't very well redesign and rebuild the entire Batmobile interior to accommodate the costume. Instead, they took the more practical approach and created a special modified cowl specifically for driving scenes. This alternate version featured noticeably shorter ears that allowed Keaton to slide into the driver's seat without difficulty, though the change was carefully managed to maintain continuity throughout the film. If you watch closely, you can sometimes spot the difference between the full-height cowl used in most scenes and the shorter-eared version worn during close-ups inside the Batmobile. Fact 3. The afterburner could only burn 15 seconds. One of the most spectacular features of the Batmobile was its flaming rear exhaust, which shot impressive jets of fire from the back of the vehicle during several memorable scenes in the film. Unlike many movie effects that rely on visual trickery or post-production enhancement, this afterburner effect was completely real and genuinely dangerous. The production team installed an actual functioning flame system in the rear of the Batmobile, fed by a fuel reservoir that could ignite on command to create those dramatic bursts of fire. When triggered, the flames roared from the exhaust ports with authentic intensity, giving the Batmobile an aggressive, almost military appearance as it roared through Gotham City's streets. However, there was a significant limitation that constantly frustrated the filming crew. The afterburner could only sustain its flames for approximately 15 seconds before completely exhausting its fuel supply. This meant that every single shot featuring the flaming exhaust had to be carefully planned and executed within that tight window of time. If a take ran too long, or if the director wanted multiple angles of the same burning sequence, the crew had to stop everything and refill the fuel reservoir before they could shoot again. The refilling process itself wasn't quick or simple either, as it required carefully pouring volatile fuel into the tank while ensuring no sparks or heat sources were nearby. This created constant delays during production, especially during the climactic chase sequences where Burton wanted continuous shots of the Batmobile speeding through Gotham with flames trailing behind it. The 15-second limit meant that longer driving sequences required multiple takes that would later be edited, together to create the illusion of sustained burning. Fact 4. Parts scavenged from Ferrari and buses. The Batmobile's creation involved an unusual international scavenger hunt for automotive parts that would have seemed absurd to anyone outside the production team. When Anton Furst and his designers were hunting for components that could be adapted for their custom-built vehicle, they didn't limit themselves to specialty manufacturers or custom fabricators. Instead, they raided junkyard lots, automotive suppliers, and even kept their eyes open while walking down ordinary streets. The Batmobile's distinctive round taillights, which glow red when the vehicle brakes, didn't come from any American manufacturer, but were actually pulled directly from a Ferrari sports car. The elegant circular design fit perfectly with Furst's aesthetic vision for the rear of the vehicle, and the lights themselves were already built to automotive standards for brightness and durability. But perhaps even more surprising than borrowing from Italian luxury cars was the team's decision to incorporate pieces from London's most iconic form of public transportation. The Batmobile's fuel cap, the small circular door that would cover the opening where gasoline gets pumped into the tank, was taken from a London double-decker bus. This created a bizarre situation where Batman's high-tech crime-fighting vehicle shared a component with the red buses that tourists ride around England's capital city to see Buckingham Palace and Big Ben. The eclectic mix of parts from such wildly different sources speaks to the resourcefulness and creative thinking that went into building the Batmobile. Rather than insisting everything be manufactured from scratch at enormous expense, Furst and his team recognized that sometimes the perfect piece already exists. You just have to know where to look for it. Fact 5. Upside-down Honda Civic headlights. The Batmobile's menacing front headlights, which gave the vehicle its predatory, almost reptilian stare, came from a source that nobody watching the film in 1989 would have ever suspected. Art director Terry Ackland Snow discovered the perfect solution to the headlight design challenge, not in some specialty automotive catalog or through expensive custom fabrication, but simply by looking at his own wife's car parked in their driveway. She drove a Honda Civic, one of the most common economy cars on the road, and one day Ackland Snow found himself studying the headlight assembly with fresh eyes. He noticed that the shape of the Civic's headlights had an interesting angular design, and a creative idea suddenly struck him. What would they look like if you flipped them completely upside down? When he mentally rotated the image, he realized the inverted headlights created a narrow, shrouded appearance that perfectly matched the sinister look they wanted for Batman's vehicle. The horizontal opening at what was normally the bottom of the light would become a thin slit at the top, mimicking the narrowed eyes of Batman's cowl and giving the car an aggressive, almost angry expression. Ackland Snow brought his idea to the production team, and they quickly obtained some Honda Civic headlight assemblies to experiment with. After mounting them upside down on a test mock-up and painting the lenses yellow instead of the standard clear, everyone immediately saw that the effect was exactly what they needed. Those ordinary headlights transformed into something that looked purpose-built for a vigilante's combat vehicle. The yellow color added an additional layer of menace, making the Batmobile appear more insect-like or animal-like than a traditional car. Fact 6. General Motors wanted to trash the design. The Batmobile almost looked completely different from what audiences eventually saw on screen, thanks to a corporate offer that nearly derailed the entire creative vision for the vehicle. General Motors, one of America's largest automotive manufacturers, approached the Batman production with what seemed like an attractive proposition. They would invest $6 million to build the Batmobiles needed for filming, handling all the construction costs and technical challenges. For a production already facing budget concerns and tight deadlines, this seemed like a potential solution to their problems. However, GM's offer came with one non-negotiable condition that immediately created conflict with the filmmakers. The automotive giant insisted that they couldn't simply build the vehicle based on the existing drawings created by designer Julian Kaldau, who had worked closely with Anton Furst to develop the Batmobile's unique aesthetic. Instead, GM demanded that the production completely scrap Kaldau's carefully crafted designs and allow General Motors' own design team to create their version of the Batmobile from scratch. This wasn't just about minor modifications or engineering adjustments. GM wanted total creative control over how the vehicle would look. The company's designers presumably wanted to create something that would showcase GM's styling sensibilities and potentially incorporate elements that could later be marketed to consumers. Producer John Peters, known for his strong opinions and willingness to fight for the creative vision of his films, recognized that accepting GM's offer would fundamentally compromise the dark Gothic aesthetic that Tim Burton and his team had been developing. Peters refused the deal outright, choosing to maintain control over the Batmobile's design even if it meant facing greater financial pressure and construction challenges. Fact 7. Built in just 3.5 months. The timeline for building the Batmobile was absurdly compressed, even by Hollywood's typically rushed production standards. The team initially approached Ford Motor Company about constructing the vehicle, and Ford's engineers assessed the complexity of the design before providing their estimate they would need 6 months to complete the build. For most custom vehicle projects, 6 months would be considered remarkably fast, but the Batman production schedule simply couldn't accommodate that lengthy timeline. Filming dates were already set, locations were booked, and the Batmobile needed to be ready far sooner than Ford could deliver. After Ford withdrew from the project due to the scheduling impossibility, the responsibility fell to John Evans and his team of automotive specialists and fabricators. Evans examined the same complex blueprints that had led Ford to request 6 months and somehow committed to completing the seemingly impossible task in just 3.5 months. This meant the team would need to work at nearly double the pace that a major automotive manufacturer considered feasible. The construction process became an around-the-clock operation, with welders, body workers, painters, and mechanics working in coordinated shifts to keep progress moving forward constantly. There were no weekends off, no leisurely problem-solving sessions. Every single day counted, and any significant setback could have derailed the entire production. The team had to make countless quick decisions about materials, construction methods, and design compromises, always balancing the need for speed against the requirement that the finished vehicle look spectacular on camera. They built the frame, shaped thousands of pounds of fiberglass bodywork, installed the mechanical systems, and completed all the finishing details in roughly half the time Ford thought necessary. Fact 8. Tops out at only 30 mph. Despite its aggressive appearance and design elements borrowed from fighter jets and military vehicles, the actual Batmobile was surprisingly slow when driven on real streets. The finished vehicle, when fully assembled with all its bodywork and equipment installed, could barely reach 30 miles per hour at maximum speed, slower than most people drive through residential neighborhoods. This disappointing performance came from the combination of the Batmobile's massive weight and the limitations of its power system. The vehicle tipped the scales at several tons thanks to its steel frame, fiberglass body panels, and all the attached equipment, making it far heavier than any standard car. During the actual filming of Batman in 1989, the Batmobile used a conventional gasoline engine that provided somewhat better performance, though still nothing close to what the vehicle's menacing appearance suggested. However, after filming concluded and the Batmobile transitioned into promotional appearances and public displays, the production team made a decision that further limited its speed. They replaced the gasoline engine with electric motors, primarily for safety and practical reasons. Electric motors are quieter, produce no exhaust fumes, and are generally more reliable for the stop-and-go nature of promotional events where the vehicle might be started and stopped dozens of times. Unfortunately, the electric motors lack the power needed to propel such a heavy vehicle at anything approaching impressive speeds. The 30-mile-per-hour maximum meant that the Batmobile couldn't actually participate in any real high-speed chase sequences, which is why many of the driving scenes in the film were carefully shot to hide the vehicle's sluggish performance through creative camera angles, editing, and the use of miniature models. Fact 9. Different paint jobs for each film. The Batmobile underwent a subtle but deliberate transformation between Tim Burton's first Batman film in 1989 and its sequel, Batman Returns, in 1992. While casual viewers might not have noticed the difference, the vehicle's paint finish changed significantly to match the evolving aesthetic of Burton's Gothic vision. In the original Batman, the Batmobile featured a matte black finish that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, giving the vehicle a flat, almost stealth-like appearance. This matte finish made the Batmobile look more tactical and military, as if it were genuinely designed to move through shadows without drawing attention. The surface had a subtle roughness to it that suggested serious functionality over flashy appearance, fitting with the grounded tone Burton established in the first film. However, when Batman Returns entered production 3 years later, Burton and his production team decided to update the look of both Batman's costume and his vehicle to create a sleeker, more stylized appearance. The Batmobile was completely refinished with a glossy black paint that reflected light and created dramatic highlights across its curved surfaces. This shiny finish made the vehicle appear more elegant and refined, almost like a luxury sports car rather than a military vehicle. The glossy paint caught and reflected the lights of Gotham City, creating a more dynamic visual presence in the film's numerous night scenes. This change aligned perfectly with the overall aesthetic shift in Batman Returns, which leaned even more heavily into German expressionist influences and created a more fantastical, less realistic version of Gotham City. The glossy Batmobile fit naturally into this heightened world where everything felt slightly more theatrical and operatic than the first film. Fact 10. Radio-controlled miniature for Batcave scenes. When audiences watched the thrilling sequence of the Batmobile racing through the forest road toward the hidden entrance of the Batcave, many assumed they were seeing the full-size vehicle being filmed from creative angles. In reality, some of the most dramatic shots in this sequence featured something much smaller and more manageable: a carefully constructed, radio-controlled miniature version of the Batmobile. Building and filming with the full-scale Batmobile presented enormous logistical challenges, particularly for shots that required the vehicle to navigate through tight spaces or travel at higher speeds than the real car could manage. The production team solved this problem by commissioning a detailed scale model of the Batmobile that could be remotely controlled by an operator with a radio transmitter. This miniature version was constructed with the same attention to detail as the full-size car, ensuring that its proportions, paint finish, and features matched perfectly when filmed with the right camera techniques. The model makers built a miniature forest road set, complete with scaled-down trees, rocks, and ground textures that would surround the tiny Batmobile as it zipped along the track. By carefully controlling the camera's speed and angle, the filmmakers could make this small model appear to be the full-size vehicle racing at high speed through a real forest. The radio-controlled Batmobile allowed the operators to achieve shots that would have been impossible or prohibitively expensive with the actual vehicle, including tight cornering sequences and high-speed approaches to the Batcave entrance. This technique was a common practice in action filmmaking before computer-generated imagery became sophisticated enough to handle such effects, and it required tremendous skill to make the miniature work appear seamless alongside footage of the real Batmobile. Fact 11. David Copperfield's $189,500 lawsuit. Famous illusionist David Copperfield learned a painful lesson about the importance of authenticity verification when he spent a fortune on what he believed was a genuine piece of Batman film history. In the years following the release of Tim Burton's Batman films, various Batmobiles appeared at auctions and sales as the studio and private collectors liquidated promotional materials and film equipment. Copperfield, like many wealthy fans of the franchise, was eager to own this iconic vehicle. When a Batmobile came up for auction, he jumped at the opportunity and successfully bid $189,500 to take ownership of the Dark Knight's famous ride. The purchase represented a significant investment even for a performer of Copperfield's financial means, but he believed he was acquiring an authentic vehicle that had actually appeared on screen in one of the most successful films of the era. However, after completing the transaction and taking possession of the vehicle, Copperfield began investigating its provenance more thoroughly. What he discovered was deeply disappointing. The Batmobile he'd purchased was not actually used in filming either Batman or Batman Returns. Instead, it was one of the promotional vehicles that Warner Brothers had commissioned for marketing purposes, including appearances at premieres, shopping mall displays, and publicity events. While these promotional Batmobiles were built to look identical to the screen-used versions, they lacked the history and authenticity that made the film-used vehicles truly valuable to collectors. Copperfield felt deceived by the auction and filed a lawsuit seeking $1 million in damages, arguing that the seller had misrepresented the vehicle's history. The case eventually settled out of court for undisclosed terms, but the incident highlighted the challenges of verifying authenticity in the movie memorabilia market. Fact 12. Comedian Jeff Dunham owns one and upgraded it. Ventriloquist and comedian Jeff Dunham, best known for his comedy specials featuring puppet characters like Ahmed the Dead Terrorist and Walter, is also a serious car collector with a particular passion for unique and historic vehicles. In 2011, Dunham had the opportunity to purchase something truly special, an actual Batmobile that had been used as a stunt vehicle during the filming of Batman Returns. Unlike promotional replicas or display models, this was a genuine screen-used car that had been driven during the production of Tim Burton's 1992 sequel. Dunham successfully acquired the vehicle and added it to his impressive collection. But unlike most collectors who would preserve such a piece exactly as it appeared in the film, Dunham had much more ambitious plans. He decided to transform the Batmobile from a limited film prop into a fully functional, street-legal vehicle that he could actually drive on public roads. This required a massive undertaking that ultimately cost approximately $500,000, nearly 3 times what David Copperfield had paid for his promotional version. Dunham's team of automotive specialists removed the original underpowered propulsion system and installed a genuine Corvette engine, giving the Batmobile the kind of performance its appearance had always promised, but never actually delivered. They added modern cameras to help with visibility and navigation, installed proper turn signals and brake lights to meet legal requirements, and completed countless other modifications needed to make the vehicle comply with road safety regulations. The finished product became one of the only street-legal Batmobiles in existence, allowing Dunham to occasionally drive it around his neighborhood or bring it to car shows where it never fails to create a sensation among Batman fans and automotive enthusiasts. Fact 13. OnStar spokesperson from 2000 to 2002. The Burton-era Batmobile experienced an unexpected career revival more than a decade after its theatrical debut, when General Motors recruited it to promote their OnStar vehicle communication system. Between 2000 and 2002, the Batmobile appeared in a series of 6 television commercials that brought the iconic vehicle back into the public consciousness during a period when Batman had moved on to different film interpretations. These advertisements were produced with surprising production value and attention to the source material, feeling less like typical car commercials and more like mini-episodes set in Burton's Gotham City. The commercials featured actor Bruce Thomas wearing the Batman costume and interacting with the Batmobile's OnStar system, demonstrating how even a superhero could benefit from features like emergency assistance, navigation help, and remote vehicle diagnostics. General Motors went to considerable lengths to make these commercials feel authentic to the Burton films. even bringing back actor Michael Gough to reprise his role as Alfred Pennyworth in one of the spots. This marked Gough's final appearance as the character, adding an unexpected poignancy to what was essentially a car commercial. The campaign cleverly played on the humor of Batman, a self-sufficient vigilante with tremendous resources and technical expertise, needing help from a car service to navigate Gotham City or deal with vehicle problems. The commercials were generally well received by audiences who appreciated seeing the classic Batmobile design again, even in this commercial context. The campaign represented an interesting moment in superhero marketing, coming during a transitional period between the Burton-Schumacher Batman films and before Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy would completely redefine the character for a new generation. Fact 14. 5 total cars built. The production of Batman and Batman Returns required multiple copies of the Batmobile to meet the various demands of filming and promotion, though the exact number might surprise people who assume Hollywood creates dozens of duplicates for major productions. In total, 5 Batmobiles were constructed with official authorization from the studio. 2 of these vehicles were the primary functional cars built for actual filming, designed to be driven during production and capable of performing the various practical stunts and driving sequences required by the scripts. These hero cars received the most attention to detail and featured fully finished interiors, working lights, and the various mechanical systems needed for them to operate safely on closed filming locations. The other 3 Batmobiles were created specifically for publicity purposes rather than filming, and they were built with different priorities in mind. These promotional vehicles needed to look absolutely identical to the screen-used cars when photographed or displayed at public events, but they didn't require the same level of mechanical sophistication since they would rarely be driven more than short distances at slow speeds. The promotional Batmobiles traveled to movie premieres, appeared at shopping malls and car shows, and served as marketing tools to build excitement for the films. This relatively small number of authorized vehicles makes authenticated Batmobiles quite rare in the collector's market, though numerous unlicensed replicas have been built by car enthusiasts and replica manufacturers over the decades since the film's release. The distinction between the 2 filming cars and 3 promotional vehicles has become important for collectors and historians trying to verify the provenance of Batmobiles that appear at auctions or in private collections. Fact 15. A federal judge ruled it's a character. In 2013, a surprising legal battle reached federal court that would fundamentally change how intellectual property law views fictional vehicles. DC Comics and Warner Brothers sued Mark Towell, a California-based car customizer who had built and sold replicas of various Batmobiles from different Batman productions, including the iconic Burton-era design. Towell argued that the Batmobile was simply a car, a useful object that couldn't be protected under copyright law in the same way that characters, stories, or artistic works could be protected. His defense maintained that copyright protection shouldn't extend to functional vehicles, even if those vehicles appeared in copyrighted films. However, Judge Ronald Liu of the Central District of California saw the matter quite differently and issued a ruling that established important precedent for intellectual property protection of fictional objects. Judge Liu officially ruled that the Batmobile qualifies as a copyrightable character rather than merely a vehicle design, giving it the same legal protections afforded to Batman himself or any other character appearing in the comics and films. The judge's reasoning centered on the idea that the Batmobile possessed consistent character traits across different interpretations. It was always associated with Batman, always aided in crime fighting, and always represented an extension of Batman's persona and capabilities. Perhaps most importantly, Judge Liu noted that the Batmobile's functional elements only make sense within Batman's fictional world. The vehicle's weapons, armor, and various crime-fighting tools serve no real-world purpose and exist purely to support the character's narrative role. This ruling established that sufficiently distinctive fictional vehicles with consistent characteristics across multiple works can receive copyright protection as characters, setting a precedent that extends beyond just the Batmobile.